Could you switch the live screen on? I'll get somebody to put the live screen on, please.
Okay, I will confirm when it's live.
Okay.
I can confirm it's now live, Chair.
Okay. Thanks one and all for attending tonight's meeting. I shall do the usual stuff. Item number 1, announcements. Due to the government's guidance on social distancing and the COVID-19 virus, this meeting will be screened live and recorded for later production on the Council's website. Item number 2, apologies to the Chief Policies for absence from the meeting. Could you switch the live screen on? I'll get somebody to put live. I've got many pieces of paper here, there and everywhere.
Okay, I will confirm when it's live.
Okay. I have several apologies. Do you want to?
I can confirm it's now live, Chair.
Okay. Do you want to read them out, Kelly?
Yes, Chair.
Thanks one and all for
so we have
attending
apologies
today's meeting.
from Councillor Croft and substitute is Councillor Brown. I have an apology from Councillor Gran and substitute is Councillor Panday.
Due to the government's guidance on social distancing and the COVID-19 virus,
Longdon.
This meeting will be screened live
an
and
apology from
recorded for
Councillor
later
Sargent
production on the
and
Council's
substitute
website.
is Councillor Jane Sargent.
Item number 2. Okay. Apologies to the Chief Policies for absence from the meeting. Item number 3. Is to sign the minutes, confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the live screen on. I'll get somebody to do it live. I've got many pieces of paper here and everywhere.
Okay, I will confirm when it's live.
Okay. I have several apologies. Do you want to?
I can confirm it's now live, Chair.
Okay. Yep. Do you want to read them out, Kelly?
Yes,
right.
Chair.
Thanks one and all for
so we have apologies from Councillor Croft and substitute is Councillor Brown. I have an apology from Councillor Gran and substitute is Councillor Panday.
Due to the government's guidance on social distancing and the COVID-19 virus, this meeting will be screened live and recorded for later production on the Council's website. Item number 2. Okay. Apologies to the Chief Policies for absence from the meeting.
I have
Item number 3.
Non-pecuniary interest
to sign the minutes, confirm the minutes of the meeting held on
the
live stream now. I'll get somebody to do it. I've got my pieces of paper here and everywhere.
Okay, I will confirm when it's live.
Apart from that, has anybody else got any? I have several apologies. Do you want to?
I can confirm it's now live.
13, it says that I'm employed by the House of Commons.
Yes,
right.
Chair.
Thanks one and all for
so we have
today's meeting.
Registered interest in my interest that
I shall do the
two organisations.
usual stuff.
Councillor Gran
and item number 1, announcement. Due to the government's guidance on social distancing and the COVID-19 virus, this meeting will be screened live and recorded for later production on the Council's website. Item number 2. Okay. Apologies to the Chief Policies for absence from the meeting. Item number 3. To sign the minutes, confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the live stream now. I'll get something to do my pieces of paper here and everywhere.
Okay, I will confirm when it's live.
Apart from that, anybody else got any? I have several apologies. Do you want to?
I can confirm it's now live.
Do you want to do the
yes,
thanks one and all for
so we have
attending today's meeting.
Councillor Croft
I shall
and substitute is Councillor
do
Brown
the usual stuff.
Councillor Gran
and item number 1, announcement. Due to the government's guidance on social distancing and the COVID-19 virus, this meeting will be screened live and recorded for later production on the Council's website. Item number 2. Apologies to the Chief Policies for absence from the meeting. Item number 3. To sign the minutes, confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the live stream now.
Okay, I will confirm when it's live.
Apart from that, anybody else got any? I have several apologies. Do you want to?
I can confirm it's now our line?
Good.
Do you want to do the
Yes, tell us
for
so we have the crop.
I showed
Councillor Graham. Councillor Graham.
due to the government guidance on social distancing and the COVID-19 virus, people explain why and everybody on the website. Item number 2, apologies to the sea policies for all the Item number 3, as to sign the minutes, confirm the minutes, and make use of the available files to apart from that, anybody else got any? There's several things. Do you want to?
I can confirm it's now live.
Do you want to do the
Yes, tell us
for
the crop.
I showed Item number 2, apologies to the sea policies for all the Item number 3, as to sign the minutes, confirm the minutes, and make use of the available files to apart from that, anybody else got any? There's several things. Do you want to?
I can confirm it's now live.
Do you want to do the
Yes, tell us
Item number 2, apologies to the sea policies for all the Item number 3, as to sign the minutes, confirm the minutes, and make use of the available files to apart from that, anybody else got any? There's several things. Do you want to?
I can confirm it's now live.
Do you want to do the Thank you.
That we can start again. The live streamer has said that Keith, Councillor Kadaka, you were fine. It was unfortunately Abu who the sound affected. So just to let you know. Okay.
Thank you very much, Kelly. I won't repeat what I was saying. I was just finishing off by saying that I was a bit concerned about the big Hilltop and Cadwell big local project. I know it's £1 million we got for a long-term project, and it's obviously struggled over time. So maybe if Abu has got sound, you could tell me how it's getting sort of monitored and kept on track. Thank you.
Could you answer that, Abu, please?
Yeah, sure. I mean, with that project, technically the money is being managed by Warwickshire Carver. So they were the accountable body. So they took on the funds, and all of the decision making and the governance around how that is invested in that area is made by local residents.
It was unfortunately Abu
the
who
partnership that
the
Councillor
sound
Tandy
affected.
is part
So
of,
just to let you know.
that's essentially the decision making body.
Thank you very much,
And they've
Kelly.
been
I won't
given
repeat what I
a
was saying. I
timeline
was
of
just
10
finishing off
years
by saying
to
that I was a bit
work through
concerned
that.
about the big
So they've still got a bit of time
Hilltop
left,
and Cadwell big local project.
and there's a
I
number
know
of
it's £1
kind
million
of
we
ideas
got
around
for a
that,
long-term
but
project,
yeah,
and
it's
obviously
not
struggled over
always
time. So maybe if
been
Abu
easy or
has got
straightforward,
sound, you
but
could tell me
ultimately
how it's
Big
getting sort
Local
of
is all
monitored
about
and
empowering
kept on
residents
track.
and giving
Thank you.
them the capacity to
Could
make
you answer that,
decisions
Abu,
around
please?
that. And
Yeah, sure. I
yeah,
mean, with that project,
it's been
technically
yeah,
the
there's been some
money
good outcomes so far.
is being managed by
There's
Warwickshire
still
Carver.
funds remaining.
So they were the
And when
accountable
what we'll do
body.
is
So
probably if
they took
we'll have
on
Alison
the
on the
funds
call
and
That we
for the
can
next
start again.
round and the
The
governance around
live
how that
streamer
is, she'll
has
be able
said
to give
that
kind of
Keith,
a more
Councillor Clark, you were
in-depth
fine.
responses to where
It
they're
was
at.
unfortunately Abu
If that
who
helps.
the sound affected.
Chair, if I may be
Just
very
to let you know.
useful, just to have a little
essentially
note
the
before the
decision-making
meeting,
body.
just where they are with
Thank
the
you very much,
local
Kelly.
project.
I won't repeat
It's
what
a
I was
really
saying. I
long
was just
project.
finishing
Thank
off
you.
by saying
Okay, we'll
that I was a bit
take
concerned
we'll
about
take
the
note of that.
big. So they've still
Councillor
got a bit of
Panda.
time left.
Cadwell big
Yeah,
local
thank you.
project.
And there's a
I
number
know
of
it's £1
kind
million
of
we
ideas
got
around
for a
that, but
long-term
The target
project.
of
yeah,
assisting
it's
is
obviously
quite
struggled
put
over
down.
time.
So
So
maybe if
been
Abu
easy or
has got
straightforward,
sound, you
but
can tell me
752
ultimately
how it's
Big
getting
Local
sort of
Any
is all
monitored
specific
about
reason
and
why
empowering
kept on
was
residents
track.
and
down?
giving
Thank you.
them the capacity to
Could
make
you answer that,
decisions
Abu,
around
please?
that.
Again,
And
with that,
yeah, sure.
we
I
kind
mean,
of
with
slowed
that
down
project, it's
from
been
the
technically
middle
the
of
money
February,
is
and obviously
being managed by Warwickshire
as we
Carver.
moved into March, it was
So
pretty
they were
much
the
when the
accountable
offices
body.
shut
So
down.
they
So what you would
took
have
on
seen
the
is on the
funds
call we
and
changed
we
their
can
list of
start
decision
again.
making
The
from 6 to
governance around
7
how
so
that
we're
is
probably kind of
invested in
slowing
the
down
area
that
is
from
made by local residents.
just the
So
It
office.
was
whether
So
unfortunately Abu
just
who
not
help
making
the
Council
sound
Tandy
affected.
Chair, if I
contact
may
So
or
be
just
very
let you
worrying
know.
useful, just
about
have a little
something.
note
the
before the
decision-making
meeting, just
body.
where they are with
Thank you
the
very
local
much,
project.
Kelly. I won't repeat
It's
what
a
I was
really
saying. I
long
was just
project.
finishing
Thank
off
you.
by saying
Overall,
Okay,
that
we'll
I was a bit
take
concerned
we'll
about
take
the
note of that.
misses the
so they've
target
still
in
got a bit of
Panda.
time left.
So
Hilltop and Cadwell big
Yeah,
local
thank you.
project.
And there's
so
a
I
number
know
of
it's £1 million
kind of ideas
we got
around
for a
that,
long-term
but
The
project.
target of
yeah,
assisting
It's
is
obviously
quite
struggled
put
over
down.
time, so maybe if Abu
easy or
has got
straightforward,
sound, you can tell me
752
ultimately
how it's
Big
getting
Local
sort of
Any
is all
monitored
specific
about
reason
and
why this
empowering
kept on
was
residents
track.
and
down?
giving
Thank you.
them
There's
the
Kelly.
capacity to
I'll
make
pass you
decisions
on.
around that.
again
And
with that,
yeah, sure.
The
I mean,
problem's
with
got
that project,
sound.
it's
from
been
the
technically
middle
the
of
Could you
money
get
February
outcome again,
is
pal?
being managed by
Yes,
Warwickshire
Chair, I've
Carver.
asked if anyone
So
could
they
just
were the
unmute
accountable
who
body.
wishes to
So
speak.
they
So
took
what you've
on
seen
the
is on the
funds
call we
and
changed
we
their
can
list
start
of decision
again.
As I
The
can see,
governance
the
around
sound
how
is
that is
low. I'll
invested in
turn
the
that
area
up
is
as
made
well
by
for myself. And I can do that now.
affected
contact or worrying
that's
about
essentially
something.
the decision-making body.
Where they
And
are with the
they've been
local
given
Saying Abu, your mic's still live. Could you unmute it for a couple of 3 seconds, please? Thank you.
Chair, just to update you, apparently there was multiple audios going on at the same time, so they had multiple people speaking at the same time. I'm just speaking now so that they can test it and make sure that the problem has now resolved. So just bear with me, and I'll update you if it has been. Hi, Chair. Just so you know, they're still working on it at the moment. We're still trying to resolve it. Just bear with, please.
I wasn't too sure whether we should go for
Okay, Chair, just to keep you updated, the basics is that it sounds okay in the meeting, but it's just the noise on the YouTube. So at the minute, we're sort of trial and error in it. I'm talking now just to see if it has been resolved. But again, I'll just keep you updated as I get updated myself.
So what's the panel's wishes? Do we keep going on now that we know there's a problem on YouTube, or is there anything else we can do?
Okay, Chair, I think I've just had notification I think it's been fixed. So if you want to just carry on, and I'll just keep monitoring the chat just to make sure it's okay.
Okay then, if we're willing to do that, thanks Abu for your report, and I would formally second what Councillor Tandy says. Does that fall in favour with everybody else? I can't see any dissent anywhere, so we'll move on to the next programme. Item number 7, attendance and management report. Is that you, Ruth?
Yes, Chair, that's me. Good evening, everyone. Okay. Hopefully you can hear me. Apologies, but I don't have video capability. So the report just details the sickness absence performance for last financial year, 2019-20, and just highlights some of the trends within that sickness. Our target for sickness last year was 8.75 days, which was split between short term and long term. We didn't meet that target last year, but there are some noticeable differences in some of the trends. So, for example, there was a notable increase for the period November to March in terms of absences lost to cough and cold in comparison to the year before. And that could have been an early sign of possible coronavirus undiagnosed cases, because the actual length of that absence was longer on average as well. So really it's just to take any questions on any of the report, if anyone has any at all.
Has anybody got any questions on the report for Ruth? Councillor Condikar?
Yeah, just a quick one. Are you measuring attendance of people who are effectively working from home via them sort of logging on in some way and logging off via Teams or equivalent?
Okay, well, this report focuses on last financial year. In terms of since the pandemic, then yes, IT are logging of the number of the increases of people working from home. I mean, obviously there are quite a number of people working from home now. So we're monitoring self-isolation cases as well, which isn't classed as sick. But this report focuses on last year. And obviously up to the end of March, we didn't really have any real cases of self-isolation.
Okay. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Chair. I have a few issues with the report, and it might be helpful if these could be included in future managing attendance reports. It would be useful to know how many warnings have been issued throughout the year. Not necessarily the people who have had, well, definitely not the people who've had them, but it'd be nice to know how many have been issued and whether that has an increase or a decrease. That might tell us if there are any trends, and also that we know that the managing attendance policy is working. Also, although I know it's included further on in the agenda papers, as this is specifically a report about managing attendance, it would be useful to know the compliance with return to work interviews. I noticed that in Q4 last year it was about 82%, and this first quarter it's about 74%, I think, from memory. But this is something I keep banging on about, and probably because I have to do enough of them in my day job. But the thing is, it's even more important now that return to works are done to make sure that those who are returning from sick during this pandemic, they are being seen and that they are getting the right support that they need, and that they're supported both mentally and physically. with that. So return to work interviews absolutely must improve in this authority. It's not acceptable. It should be that everyone is having a return to work interview. No ifs or buts, and there should be no excuses. If it was me who was being judged on my performance on that as a manager, then it would be my performance which is questioned. And I think if things don't improve, then we do need to look at performance management at some managers who aren't doing their return to works in a timely manner, or if at all. It would also be nice to see how many referrals to any kind of workplace support have been made, because I think the council does offer some workplace support. I mean, PAM Assist where I work, I don't know if it's the same, but they can be there to provide a wide range of support to members of staff who are struggling, whether it be financially, emotionally, physically, domestic abuse even. They can be there to help support. It'd be nice to know, not necessarily the reasons why, but if there are any interventions or referrals being made. And also it would be useful to know what the financial implications are. So we have in here the days lost per FTE, etc., but it doesn't actually give us a financial implication. When I get managing attendance reports periodically where I work, we are actually told what the actual cost is to the authority of the total sickness that year. So taking however many days and what their daily rate is, and how much that totals up to, and then how much that actually equates to in terms of employees, how much we could have employed or additional services which could have been augmented with that funding. So if we are going to do a managing attendance report, I think these things need to be included, not just the bare bones of the FTE lost, whether it's short or long term. But I would like to move a recommendation to Cabinet Chair, because this is a long-term issue which is really annoying me now, which is that the Cabinet need to liaise with the senior management team to improve the compliance with return to work interviews, and where necessary, instigate performance management of team leaders and other managers in making sure that they are done. There should be no excuses. Local government should be no different to any other public sector organisation, and it should be done, Chair. So I would move that as a recommendation to Cabinet.
Does that find a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Yep. Do you wish to speak?
It was just to second the proposal from Councillor Wilson, and to advise that in my day job, I would also say that return to work interviews from a management point of view are mandatory, and I can't see why they're not here. So if they're not already mandatory, we ought to be making them mandatory, because if we're not taking due care of our employees by making sure that they are fit to return to work and offering them all the support that they need, we're really not in a position to complain if there's subsequent action against the council. So we really need to get that dealt with. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Ruth, have you taken those things into consideration?
I have noted all of those, and that information, just to clarify, we have an update to the First Care system, which is our absence management system, and we're in the process of inputting real-time data in terms of people's salary, so we will be able to report on true financial implications of sickness. We can also report on monitoring information as well. In terms of return to work compliance, I do agree they are very important. It is mandatory, and our return to work targets for completion within 3 days of return. So in terms of the compliance rate, it doesn't necessarily mean that it hasn't been completed. It just hasn't necessarily been completed within those 3 days, but I accept that, and from a HR point of view, I agree they are very important.
Anybody else wish to speak on the subject? Can't find anybody else. It's been moved, it's been seconded that we send this to the Cabinet with the panel's wishes. Everybody agree with that?
Absolutely.
I find no dissent here, and so can we move that and formally move that, and we'll put it forward to the Cabinet for a suggestion for the future. Thank you. Item number 8, the museum performance report. Just thinking of just where I'm just miles away at the present moment. I'm just trying to think. My apologies. It's Christine, is it? I'm just trying to. Catherine. Are you there, Catherine? Speak to me.
Good evening, Chair.
I should know with the amount of stuff we did over the last year or so. My apologies for
that. Can everybody hear me at the moment? Can I just check?
I can hear you.
That's fine. Well, thank you very much. The report that's been prepared for your consideration is a follow-on to one that was produced for the March the 19th meeting, which unfortunately didn't take place. The report details the operation of the museum during lockdown and our subsequent reopening. The museum's always provided some of its services digitally with blog, Instagram and Facebook, but lockdown threw down the challenge to us to take many more of our services online for people to be able to access and enjoy. This involved such things as curators' chats that were filmed, rhyme times that were filmed, spot the difference challenges, online jigsaws, and an online book group that we ran for some weeks as part of the Exploring Eliot project. I tried to give you as full a picture as I could of the last sort of 6 months in the report, and I'm happy to take any questions that anybody wishes to ask.
Any questions on the report? Councillor Condicor?
Thank you very much, Chair. The museum's an absolutely brilliant asset we've got. I went to the George Eliot event the tail end of last year, which, yeah, they really need more advertising because they put a lot of work in and showing us around the George Eliot exhibition and giving us a lot of the local history. So I really hope we can get more publicity and more people going to these George Eliot events. It might be worth actually inviting all the councillors quite explicitly when we get back to normal to some more of these events. One question I have is, how are we working with the Warwickshire County Museum Service and the other museums at a time of lockdown and going forward if things open up and we have more people doing holidays in Warwickshire, possibly if there's less people able to leave the country? Have we got sort of a plan, particularly for like City of Culture and trying to get a sort of Warwickshire tourist sort of loop or something involved? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Catherine.
I'm actually in a meeting next Tuesday morning all about that's being coordinated by the Tourism Department of Warwickshire County Council. In terms of contact with my other colleagues at the Herbert and Rugby Museum and Leamington, a lot of the contact over the last few months is about how we've been moving forward and supporting each other in being able to make our buildings and sites COVID secure, both for our workers and then subsequently for our visitors. So that's been a large part of the conversation. More specifically with the Herbert and with Warwickshire Libraries, we're involved in the Exploring Eliot project. That's continued during lockdown, and we're just working on a joint website that will promote George Eliot and those three collections jointly, in the hopes that we can kind of get a kind of circuit going, as you say, and people moving around those collections and things together. We've just been today looking at the next stage of the engagement for that. And actually what has worked really well for us and the ongoing part of that project is that our website is timed to go live about the time City of Culture now goes live. The latest contact I've had from them is that they're now running their year from May next year onwards. And so now we're just trying to consider what we think it's going to be possible for us to do to take advantage of that, hopefully increased footfall at the museum.
Thank you, Catherine. Councillor Evans.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Catherine, thank you very much for this detailed report, and they're always detailed whenever you bring them to the committee, so thank you for bringing this to us. Just out of interest, what sort of exhibitions do we have planned going forward for the next 12 months, or should I probably say virtual exhibitions or online engagement? I'd just be interested to know. Obviously, we've done a lot on George Eliot this year, but I wondered what you've got planned for the next 12 months.
Okay, for the next couple of months, we're starting to bring artists back onto site. We've had to do quite a lot of work about how we're going to quarantine artwork and allow them to book their work in safely. So we've got an exhibition of street art coming in, and then a craft exhibition that's coming into Christmas. Next year, we're still finalising. We've had some very detailed conversations with the Festival of Art to see whether there is a safe way for us to deliver those exhibitions, because they're a key part of the calendar each year. In terms of, say, a more local history focus to next year, plans are for a 90s exhibition. A lot of the feedback we're getting, and actually a lot of the feedback we've seen through the Cultural Recovery Unit for the West Midlands, is that people want something upbeat and fun to look forward to. And Decade exhibitions have certainly provided that in the past. So we'll look to be doing that sometime next year. We're also waiting to put in a bid when the HLF sort of give us the nod that we can, to do a community-focused project, which will result in an exhibition about the Nuneaton Abbey. Hugely important in terms of history, because the nuns there were the first people to give us the market, to establish the fair each year, and all of that. And it actually, I think, with transforming Nuneaton coming along, it's a really great time to look at how the town came to being in the first place. So we're just waiting to put that in, and that exhibition would take place next September. We're just starting to schedule artists and things for next year, but we're also acutely aware that plans can get derailed, artists can become ill and not be able to fulfil their obligation or their exhibition. So we're also prepping an additional show about women artists in the collection, as that's become a bit of a focus in the last few years. And we'll prep that show so that it can be brought in at short notice if we need to have something on for our visitors, and then an artist isn't able to show because they're ill or self-isolating, whatever.
Well, that's great news, and I know that you mentioned the West Midlands Culture Recovery Unit. Are you putting in any bids for the DCMS funding, the Culture Recovery Fund? Are you putting any bids in for that towards any of those exhibitions?
Sorry, we're not doing so at the minute. We'll look for HLF funding for the medieval one. We're looking at project funding from the Arts Council. Again, this is George Eliot, but this is linked to City of Culture, and doing some research and development work to possibly create a new gallery. I don't know if any of you have perhaps had a chance to see the feedback that's come back from the recent consultation that was done for the town centres, but there was interest in that, in a new gallery for George Eliot. So that's a bit more George Eliot focused. In terms of most of the COVID recovery money that's coming out, you weren't eligible for anything you'd spent before October this year. And actually, as we were one of the first people to reopen actually in Warwickshire, opening in July, we'd kind of done our major spend on getting reopened before that fund opened, unfortunately. So looking at the odds, it doesn't look like we would be particularly competitive in that, although I believe the Civic Hall have applied.
Okay. I don't know if I'm the best person to ask you about the tea room that's operated in the museum, or, well, obviously before COVID. It's my understanding that we don't operate the tea room. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, that's right. The tea room went out about 10 years ago, actually. It's a kind of rental stroke license arrangement.
Okay, and I do apologise. I'm not too sure how long you've been with the authority, but has there been a difference between the tea room under private ownership and local government ownership?
I suppose I mean, in terms of customer satisfaction, I think that the satisfaction has been roughly the same, really. We have a good relationship with the operator. He's currently operating a takeaway service, and we're working with him to bring that back onto site fully. Clearly, if any of you visited the museum, it's not the biggest space, and so we've been trying to find a way that it can operate safely for those who want to use it and for those general visitors to the museum, but also in a way that is viable for him.
Yes, thank you for that. And my last question, obviously you've got a small shop within the museum, and obviously due to COVID, you're probably not taking any income from that. Have you considered creating some sort of online shop?
Yes, the museum shop isn't operating at the moment, but it will start to operate again from next week. There was very strong advice from the new NMDC, the National Museum Directors Council, that you brought your shops back on later once you had an idea of your visitor flow. We're now confident that we can bring back a small enhanced offering. A lot of our stock is not bespoke, so to speak. A lot of it is just general stuff that we buy in. But I am pleased to say that we've been trying to see how to say this. We applied to become someone who would get digital mentoring support, and we were one of 20 organisations selected across the country. We're just about to set up our first meeting with our digital mentor, and one of the things that we were asking about there was online commerce. So we're hoping that with that support and that advice, we can find a viable alternative. Should a shop of our own online not be viable, we do have the option through Art UK, which we're exploring, of being able to offer a post-to-print service of some of the items that we've got on that site, and also the potential to sell a couple of our bespoke items through that as well. We're in talks with them. There's quite a long queue because actually every cultural organisation who had paintings on there is all trying to do the same thing at the same time, and I think they've been somewhat overwhelmed, but we'll continue to pursue that. I'm pleased to say that since we have come back, we have physical coin donation boxes. We weren't sure whether people would be donating when they came back, but they are donating slowly. So at least that stream of income has started to come back, and we'll start to see whether this craft show that we've got on in November, December, which is normally our biggest selling show of the year. We'll just have to see how that goes. Clearly, it's not just a case of the cash handling with that, but the fact that many people are perhaps not as well off and are concerned about their futures and may spend less on Christmas this year. But we will see how that goes. At least we're open and we're able to try and bring that income in there.
Thank you for answering those questions, Catherine. That's much appreciated. I haven't been to the museum for some time, so I think I might book a slot online to come in at some point. So,
good. We'd be glad to see you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Elliott.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to comment on some of the fabulous feedback that's printed here, pages 67 to 70. Feedback's superb. It's clearly a very highly valued museum, and you always seem to have new and interesting things. We don't have an art gallery in Hinckley, so I like to come here. There seem to be lots of visitors from outside of the town. Somebody's commented on there being a direct bus to the museum, which they're using. Somebody said, I saw Nuneaton on a map and had never been there, so looked up things to do and found the museum. Talking about a little bit of anxiety about it potentially closing, and don't know where that's coming from, but terrible shame if Nuneaton were to lose its museum. And some talk about perhaps the marketing effort being increased so the word gets out wider, and that overall, obviously, and I go there and I know the children love it, really well run. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson. Thanks for that, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask Catherine about our collections, and in particular, is any work being done on capturing the current history that we're living through about COVID? Because this is unprecedented in both national and locally, and I think we need, as a historian, from a historian's point of view, and something I enjoy is amateur history, that it would be nice for us as an authority and as a museum to collect information about COVID and the life and times of the people.
Thank you, Councillor. Indeed, we actually had our first collection of COVID material last week, including things like the original Prime Minister's letter that came through, some handmade masks and things. So we've already collected some physical stuff. One of our projects during lockdown was to invite people to share their lockdown diaries with us, which I think we had about 6 different residents of the borough have done that over a period of time. And we've been sharing them on our blog site so that you can get an insight into everyday life. We particularly wanted to do that, as you say, because we wanted to collect it now, but we do have other diaries in the collection that detail wartime. And it's so interesting to see the kind of mental health journey that people have been going on at this time and compare it with that. So we will continue to encourage those things.
Thank you for that, Catherine, because one of the things I'm doing at work is mainly for my own sanity and to keep track of what's going on. I've been keeping notes throughout COVID, and it occurred to me the other day as I was reading through them that someone, I don't know who, they'd have to be pretty mad, might actually find some of the notes about working in the justice system throughout COVID interesting in 50 years' time. But I would like to move a formal recommendation to Cabinet, because I think this is an exciting area to explore, and I think we need to put it on a more formal footing and have a proper plan for it. But I would like to move that the portfolio holder for Arts and Leisure commissions a detailed COVID history project for the museum with a detailed action plan and delivery plan for collating that information and future works to be done on it. Because I think it's so vitally important that as part of our cultural heritage and history that we're able to capture what's going on. And it sounds like you've done some good work, but I think we perhaps need to put a bit more focus on it and promote it a bit more, because I think for generations to come, they're going to find it interesting. Who would have known that a child in the 1940s would find their diaries in a GCSE history project? It could be that some residents from Nuneaton in 2020 eventually find that their diary or their activities are the subject of whatever educational qualification it is for history in 50 years' time. So I'd like to move that. I think it needs to be put on a more formal footing and more activity and coordination put behind it.
Thanks for that, Councillor Wilson. I'd formally second that, but I would only just add the rider Nuneaton and Bedworth rather than just Nuneaton, because we are a borough, and
of course,
I'm sure that the experience is somewhat different from different places at different times, I think so. Councillor Rudkin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would support this, and I was going to say what you've already said, John, and Bedworth, but I do think that this is already happening. I think Catherine has worked quite hard on this, and I do think this is already happening. So I just wanted to highlight that. Really, I don't think we needed this, but I would support it. Thank you.
I have Councillor Evans's hand up. He's already spoke. Is there anybody who hasn't spoke before I bring Councillor Evans back in? Councillor Longden.
Thank you, Chair. I'm opposed to this. I think Catherine's got it covered, and the whole thing does not need this sort of formality, because it's only more pressure than they've got to deliver on, and I think she's dealing with it very well, and there's obviously an interest there. So I think what she's said already should just be the process of going forward for historical reasons. So I don't think this formality business is is necessary because it's already being done. So I won't be voting for it.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Is there any other councillor who wishes to speak who hasn't spoke before I bring Councillor Evans in? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. There was another question that I had, which I didn't ask before. The artwork and the paintings in the town hall, is that part of the museum's collection?
Most of them are, but there are some obviously that belong to the mayoralty that are now sit also outside the chamber, and the black and white photographs, period photographs, are also the sort of town halls rather than ours.
Ah, I see. Right. Okay. So my question is, if there was somebody who wanted to see a specific piece of art that's in the town hall and it's part of the museum's collection, is there some sort of an arrangement in place for them to come into the town hall to see and study that piece of work if they wish?
Absolutely. I mean, access is a little bit more challenging at the moment because of COVID, but we are still giving access to researchers, and actually we've got someone coming on Monday. So the principle is that whatever our collection is, if it's not on display, we can make appointments for people to see it. So that includes, and we have taken people to the town hall to see those, but it includes our archaeology and anything that isn't currently on display. We'll make that arrangement. Sometimes people want to see things because there's a family connection, but we also welcome researchers. We've got someone coming from Penguin Books, who's creating a podcast about Mill on the Floss and George Eliot. He'll be attending with the author Louis de Bernier next Thursday, and I will be making some parts of the George Eliot collection available on that occasion so they can be discussed in that podcast, and hopefully we'll get the knock-on effect of people, knowing more about the collection and then coming to visit us later on.
Yeah, it's just there's some fantastic pieces of art in the town hall. I mean, there's a drawing of Hartsell Castle on first floor, and that's a fantastic piece of work. And just from my own opinion, I think those pieces of art would be far better in a museum which the public can see, rather than behind closed doors just to make the town hall look fancy. But that's just my personal opinion.
What I would say is that I do know that a lot of the staff do actually appreciate those paintings, and I actually was speaking to someone earlier and they were talking about their particular favourite. So sometimes it can be, sometimes I have to remind myself that sometimes the people who work in the council are also my stakeholders and my visitors, and maybe I have to remind myself of that sometimes. So I take.
Is it possible sometimes to swap some of the art pieces between the town hall and the museum, just so there's sort of a rotation, if you get what I'm saying?
We did the last sort of changeover about, I don't know, it's 2 or 3 years ago. I kind of lose track. It does take quite a lot of person power, shall we say, to change them. So it is an investment in time. And to do it, because that then takes time away from maybe putting an exhibition on site. But we have cycled them before, and we do have to do that just for their protection, because even things will fade. So eventually we nearly always have to remove someone's favourite and replace it with something else and another view for people. So we do that. It's not formalised. It's not like I've got in the calendar, oh, it's December 20 whatever and they need to be changed now. But we are going to potentially have to move some for some contractors' work later in the year, and we'll look then at whether we want to rest any and change any over at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Elliott, you've got your hand up again.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd meant to comment. I believe the museum makes a profit, but I'd just like to perhaps raise an amendment to the motion to congratulate Catherine and the museum on the efforts, and I believe this work is already happening going forward, and would welcome the ongoing work. So just an amendment to congratulate efforts and welcome ongoing work. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wilson, do you see that as a positive part of your amendment?
I'm happy to accept that as a friendly amendment, Chair.
Before I take the vote, can I turn around and say my support for the museum? When people think of museums, they think of old and dusty, and perhaps the COVID thing has actually made the outreach workers even more outreachable, if that's such a word. And I think that the modern look that there is happening in the museum at the present moment is brilliant. And the work that your people did in the town centre as well, Catherine, was much appreciated by members of the public, because a couple of three people asked me what was happening and what was going on, and they thought it was very good. I'm quite willing to support Councillor Wilson's he suggested to go in front of the cabinet. I don't think it's any extra. I think it's an enhancement to what Catherine's doing. Catherine and her staff are doing at the present moment, and if it just highlights it just that wee bit more for people's, because this is unusual times, as we keep saying, and if people can put those thoughts down and wherever they are and say this is what happened to us, so their grandchildren or children can have a look at it in 30 or 40 years' time. As I was part of the mining seams project not so long ago, and people were putting down their thoughts about what was happening in the pits in those days, even the social side of things, and never mind the dangers of working in the mines. So I think it's a positive living history. Never think of museums as somewhere stuffy and covered in dust. This museum in Nuneaton is well beyond that, and I'd like to thank everybody in the museum for doing all the stuff they have been doing, particularly over the COVID. Saying that, I've got Councillor Tandy wishes to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Could you just clarify for me where we are with the proposal or an amendment, Chair, please? I understood that Councillor Wilson agreed Councillor Elliott's as a friendly amendment, so I'm not quite sure where we are with the voting, Chair.
Kelly, could you have you got it written down what the councillor said and the further amendment or the friendly amendment?
I may need Councillor Wilson to repeat some of it. I've got that he wants to recommend to Cabinet that that the portfolio holder for arts and leisure for collating a detailed COVID project, but the ending bit I probably missed. So if Councillor Wilson wouldn't mind repeating his motion, that would be great.
Councillor?
I'm just typing it into the chat now, Chair. I've just put it in, Chair, to recommend to the portfolio holder for arts and leisure to commission a COVID history project through the museum to collate the living history during COVID. And I've accepted the part about commending the staff at the museum for all their hard work during COVID.
And Councillor Elliott's amendment is to congratulate efforts in the ongoing work and welcome the ongoing work.
Yeah.
Is that fine favour with everybody in the panel? Can we pass that forward to the Cabinet?
Agreed.
Okay, I can't see any dissent. Oh, Barry.
Thank you, Chair. I did say I wouldn't vote for this, and I can't vote for this because of the way it's been worded. But until such time as Councillor Elliott put her bit in, I was on the horns of a dilemma whether to support or not, and so I'm going to abstain. I'll have it recorded, please.
Chair, you're muted.
There's, with one abstention, everybody appears to be in favour. And Councillor Brown, could you mute your mic, please? Thank you. Right. We move on to the next item. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This report provides members with an update of the 2019-20 financial year for the Civic Hall. It would have normally been presented earlier in the year, but however, due to COVID, this did not happen. As members may be aware, in December 29, following changes in the management team structure at the Civic Hall, a new structure commenced very early January, with the previous Civic Hall manager retiring and the post being removed. 3 new team leaders were appointed, with the heads of leisure, which was myself, overseeing that facility at that time. In drafting the report, I've tried to condense previous information from previous years, but maintaining the key areas and headings for the panel members to review. I've also added 3/4 extra sections in the Appendix 1 for members to consider. Appendix 2 and 3 is a breakdown of the Audience Development Plan and the Civic Hall pantomime information from 2019-20, and Appendix 4, as requested at the Audit and Standards Committee, is a progress report on the first 5 months. I do apologise, in Appendix 1 it says March 2019 to February 2020 in Section 4.3. That should read the 1st of April to 31st of March 2020. In order for clarity for ease, what I tried to do in Appendix 1 is put the red, amber, green traffic light system so members could see what actions have been achieved and what hasn't. And then I've also put a progress status as to what areas and why they're red, if that's the case. The additional areas, I haven't put a traffic section on red, amber, green because they weren't previously reported and weren't part of the audit report. So 10, 11, 12 and 13 are additional information for members to consider and see the current position that we are at the Civic Hall. As I say, Appendix 2 and 3 are an update on the Audience Development Pantomime, and Appendix 4 gives an update of the current status of the Civic Hall from the 1st of April. Obviously, members will be aware that the Civic Hall closed on the 20th of March with the COVID, with additional work has been undertaken since that time and ongoing. Thank you, Chair. I'll see if I can answer any questions that the panel may have.
Thanks, Kevin. But before I bring members to the first one will be Councillor Evans. Before I bring the panel in, could we have the format of this report somewhat different next time? Because I don't know about other people's eyes, but I've strained to actually read quite a lot of this in the manner it is. So can we get some bigger fonts or something on it so I can actually see it? I presume others are having the same sort of problem. By saying that, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Personally, I prefer it laid out this way. It's just an Excel spreadsheet that's just been put into a Word document. So, but anyway, I tried to ask some questions to Councillor Lloyd at the last full council, but he just went on about NHS test and trace, which had nothing to do with the Civic Hall. So I'm going to put these questions to you, and if you don't know the answer, if you could get back to me in writing, that would be much appreciated. in relation to the takeaway service, how's that been going so far?
Councillor, the takeaway service, I think if I just referred to what I did also do at the rear of the report is put a couple of slides on there just to show you. So in terms of the takeaway, we now offer the sit down and takeaway because of the social distancing that we have. We've had to reduce the tables in the sit down that we did for the Eat Out to Help Out. I think there definitely has been a slowdown of trade and business in the town centre, and the Civic Hall has suffered like many others, councillor. So it hasn't been as good as previous. So I think that is something that we do need to look at going forward. Okay,
so the takeaway service hasn't been as good as we anticipated, which I get. I'm not criticising that. I do understand. You know, we are in the midst of a global pandemic. In relation to the takeaway service, is there any reason why the service wasn't uploaded onto some of the online takeaway apps like Just Eat or Deliveroo? Because I know that some of those websites have been, a lifeline really to a lot of businesses, and I just wondered why the Civic Hall hasn't been on any of those websites.
Councillors, I understand there's a charge for that to happen, and I think in terms of the lunchtime menu that they provide at the Civic Hall, in terms of the profit margins, that potentially there would be a loss making. I think we have a restricted lunchtime menu for the delivery and the provision of the service. So I think we just need to consider that imbalance, but that is something I'll take away and revisit, councillor. Okay. In relation to the takeaway service, but the bistro more generally, I've recently read the government figures that says that there were 82,000 meals discounted across Bedworth and North Warwickshire as part of the government's Eat Out to Help Out scheme. So I was just wondering, on the days that it was operating, which I think from memory were Monday to Wednesday, were we seeing people coming in to use that scheme? Councillor, we did it Monday to. We actually changed the day to Monday to Thursday to take in consideration that. Yes, we did have people coming in to take part in that, and we had some very positive feedback about how safe they felt the premises were, the cleanliness, the staff, etc. I think one of the issues, as I showed in the first picture, is that we reduced from 17 tables to 7 because of the social distancing measures, and that has a significant impact on how many patrons that you can get through and support. I think also we have to be mindful, whilst we have put 4 chairs to every table, we do get a lot of custom and local people in the Civic Hall that will pop in for a coffee. It's a community venue, pop in and say hello. So we didn't turn people away and say, unless there's 4 people sitting at the table, you couldn't come in. So that also has an impact on obviously patrons that you can get through the door.
I was just sort of hoping that with the Eat Out to Help Out scheme running Mondays to Thursdays. I mean, if I recall, it was like £2.50 for a full English breakfast and a cup of tea. And if we're not putting people through the doors on that price, I'm not really sure what more we can do. But I'm going to move on. The last audit committee meeting, it went on about the bistro menu, and there was a decision that was made by officers to increase the menu offering at lunchtime, and it said that the rationale behind doing this was because the council received a petition from local residents, and I asked this at the audit committee, and I still haven't had an answer, but I'd like to know, was the petition from those local residents in accordance with the council's petition scheme? Because if I remember rightly, the petition was an online petition, and we don't accept online petitions. And my concern is, I've got constituents who organised a borough-wide petition and had to knock people's doors, stand in town centres to get 5,000 signatures, and the council basically ignored that petition But we have potentially an online petition that was signed maybe by 50 residents, and the council completely changes the delivery of a council service based on that. So if you can get back to me, Kevin, on whether that petition was submitted in accordance with the council's petition scheme, that would be much appreciated. You might need to discuss that with Director Richardson. Thinking about Bedworth as a town post-COVID, I think there's certainly a lack of conferencing facilities within the town, and I think that the Civic Hall is a venue that really could offer those facilities, and you could tie the bistro in with that to offer conference banquets, for example. I recently had a discussion with a local trade association who tried to hire the Civic Hall before COVID for a conference, and the Civic Hall were not really very interested and forthcoming because it meant having to open the venue on a weekend. So if we can look at perhaps enhancing our conference facilities after coronavirus, I think that would be good for us to do. And my final question is, what discussions have you had with organisations like the Arts Council and the Local Government Association, Culture, Arts and Leisure Board regarding the Civic Hall, and how to look at best practice from other local authority run theatres so we can try and replicate that to the Civic Hall?
Councillor Evans, so just to update on that, so since taking over in late January, that the Civic Hall came under my regime as head of leisure, and then obviously now as director. I've taken that quite responsible and asked the 3 team leaders to also spread their wings in terms of what's happening in Leamington, Coventry, Belgrade, and we're doing quite a lot of consultation with others as to see what works and what doesn't. We have put a number of new initiatives and processes in place to reduce the risk for the Civic Hall in terms of bookings taken, but I'm not aware that we wouldn't support at weekends in terms of conference at all, so I will take that away, but very keen to expand what's going on outside of Nuneaton and Bedworth and how we can learn from what other venues are doing of a similar nature. Not every theatre is the same as each other, but I think there's some common causes there that we can share and learn from.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm looking at pantomimes, one of the biggest attractions of the Civic Hall at Christmas. And a few years ago, they agreed to put on they call it a relaxed pantomime, or autism friendly, which has gone from strength to strength. Now I know that this year maybe the pantomimes aren't going ahead, but it looks like that has been successful and numbers have continued to rise year on year. It looks like you're doing it now on the opening night, and just like to confirm that it is the same night. And because they are so important to families living with autism and also those with smaller children who pay to go to the pantomime and then find themselves having to leave early because the children are quite alarmed and frightened by the noise and the flashes in the audience participation, which is all toned down in the relaxed pantomime. Good for older grandparents to be taken along to, so the whole family can go and have an enjoyable evening. I tried very hard to get the Abbey Arts Centre to make one of their pantomimes autism friendly or relaxed, but they didn't feel that was something they could do. So the families are just so delighted that the Civic Hall is doing that, and I'd just like reassurance really that that's going to continue going forward. Really hope that it is.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. That's something I will relay back to the team, and I'm sure as the team that are there will have a much better insight than what I will. But if that has proved very positive, then I'm sure that's something that can continue with future pantomimes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Kevin, thank you very much for presenting the report. And I appreciate that you've taken the helm, as it were, of the Civic Hall only in January. But looking at the business improvement plan for the Civic Hall, do you not find it rather strange, as I do, that there's no target or issue in there to actually increase the number of performances that are held, presumably after COVID, of course, at the Civic Hall? Because we're in a situation where the number of performance nights has dropped off in recent years, and certainly by comparison to the volunteer-run theatre in Nuneaton, it's now we've actually got a situation where the Civic Hall is probably only having a third of the performances that theatre has. And clearly we can perhaps learn something from the way that they're running it and bringing the shows in there. So yeah, do you find it strange that there's no actual performance improvement requirement for the number of nights or number of performances that are held?
Councillor, that's something that we will be looking to move forward with the team, is to obviously fully occupy as much as we possibly can at the Civic Hall. So that is something that we would be focusing on, obviously.
Do we think then that should be a priority item in a business improvement plan for the Civic Hall?
Councillor, the stats that I've reported back on are on the previous headings that were agreed. Yeah. So I've obviously reported against those, yeah. But I think in terms of moving forward, that's an area that we certainly would look at to maximise income and shows.
Thank you, because I do appreciate that since January, there's been a sea change in the reaction to various issues at the Civic Hall since you've been in charge, and I really welcome that. The other point I would like to ask is on item 10 of the report. It's on about refurb and things like that. What would normally be the down period. Normally, I think that's usually August each year, isn't it? When refurb and things is done. Has that been carried out? Given that we haven't been putting shows on.
It has. We've taken that time to do a lot of maintenance, internal cleaning, painting, etc., and all those things that we would have normally done during that close down period. So where finances have allowed, and obviously that's a position that we find ourselves into, that we've got to work with, that is that we've been doing those repair works in-house as far as possible.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear, because the last thing we want to see is that restrictions are lifted, we're all ready to go, and then we have a close down because we want to do some maintenance work. So yeah, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Guttridge.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions for Kevin, please. With the obviously being no performances from March onwards, can you tell me how many of the original booked performances have rebooked again for next year?
Councillor Guttridge, I can. All but one have been rebooked and rescheduled.
How many is that in total, please?
I would need to come back to you on that one, Councillor Guttridge. But my understanding when I asked that question, all but one have rescheduled, and some of those it's twice and probably 3 times now because of the COVID pandemic situation. So we've rescheduled them once, twice, and now we'll be looking for the 3rd time. But I can come back to you on that after the meeting.
And thank you. And also, obviously, with 2021, what bookings have we already got in the pipeline that were booked before, booked ready for 21 without the cancellations from year 2020, please?
Okay. I will come back to that with those figures for you.
And how far in front are we booking shows for?
Councillor, my understanding is I obviously don't get involved in the day-to-day, but we will take bookings 2-3 years in advance. So there's a calendar there that we will consider bookings. What we have done is implemented a new system, as you will see that I've reported from February, is that we now do more work on the bookings to make sure that they are a show that we would like at the Civic Hall, have the potential to meet the income, and the risk is reduced from the Civic Hall being a promoted show to a private show. But in terms of those, I'll come back to you with the numbers for those 2 years.
And also, I'd like to ask, when they book online, when the customers book online and they email in and they book the tickets, do you follow that up after the show with a questionnaire?
Councillor, we've just installed the new software system, and I'm conscious that I've been asked other questions in terms of how we use customer feedback. That is something that we'll be doing with the new online system, because we can do that. We can ask questions as well, and I've just been looking at those along with other service areas, that we could have 2 or 3 questions that could be done online at the time of the booking. But also with the new booking system, it will be a virtual ticket, so they're environmental friendly. So it will be on the smartphone, and really taking advantage of that new software for us to use for future marketing and promotion.
Yes, because I believe a lot of the theatres are doing that system now.
It will be a smart ticket sent to their mobile device, phone access, etc., which will just be used on the evening. We would look to move away from the purchase of a ticket and that being collected, etc. So we will make full use of the new software that we've just installed and had training on.
Yes, thank you. I'll wait for your replies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guthrie. Councillor Condor.
Thank you very much, Chair. On that last point, I do hope we still have physical tickets to post out for those people who will pay £1 and do not have a printer, because the big change has happened that we have so many different smart devices, but actually people have lost the connectivity to printers and things. So quite a lot of things have changed. So understand people might have to pay £1 or something if they want a paper ticket, but we do need to keep that option there. In terms of the building itself, I know we moved our computer servers, our backup servers, into the Civic Hall, which is a very good move. And obviously that uses lots of electricity. Can we really think about the roof space for solar panels and things? Because we're burning electricity 24 hours a day, and at least in daytime, there must be the opportunity to actually generate quite a bit of the background energy from solar panels. And in terms of the wider building, as we've lost some of our tenants in there, can we look at how we use some of our spaces, either for council functions or something else in future? Because we get hit by capital charges. If you look at the accounts each year, a large part of the cost of running the Civic Hall is actually the capital charge for that massive building, of which only parts are used to provide a public service at the moment. So we really need to look at what we're doing with the Mayor's Parlour and some of the bits at the back, if we can actually use them either for some other council use, which can obviously then transfer the capital charge to that other use, or even some third party use. Thank you, Chair.
Kevin?
Yes, Chair, I will look into those and take those away. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. I have Councillor Evans next. Is there anybody who hasn't spoke wish to speak before Councillor Evans, before I bring Councillor Evans back in? Okay, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move an additional recommendation to this report, which is I've just put into the chat. So below recommendation 4.3, I beg to move that we insert the following. In accordance with Article 4E.20 of the Council's Constitution, this panel resolves to establish a working party to consider the future of the Bedworth Civic Hall. You're muted, Chair.
Again, Councillor Tandy.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I understand the reasoning behind Councillor Evans' proposal, I would move an amendment to that, Chair, and it would be, bearing in mind that what we have in front of us today is a development plan that has been brought forward by the Director and his staff. And my amendment is that we allow the Director and his staff to work with the development plan and to bring a report back to this committee later, early next year. Thank you, Chair.
Does that find a seconder?
Yeah, seconded. Councillor Elliott.
Okay.
Seconding the amendment, by the way.
Yeah. Councillor, could you put your amendment in the chat, please, so we can see what we're actually going to vote on, if you don't mind, Councillor Tandy. Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown.
Apologies, Chair. Apologies, Chair. Okay. Yeah, I had my hand raised to second Councillor Evans' original motion, and whilst I'd still like to speak on that, I would like to ask you to consider whether Councillor Tandy's amendment is actually legitimate on the basis that it appears to negate the essence of Councillor Evans's motion, in that his motion requests the establishment of a working party to look into a specific point, and the effect of the amendment is to completely negate that, because if the amendment is carried, then nothing that's in Councillor Evans' motion would actually happen.
Right. I actually thought it was I personally thought it was a friendly amendment, but obviously you don't think so, Councillor. Okay, we'll continue a bit further. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. If I heard Councillor Evans correctly, I thought he was moving an amendment to the recommendation, which as printed. If that's the case, then my understanding of the Constitution is that you cannot move an amendment to the amendment. You have to wait for the original amendment to be considered, and then move whatever you may wish to afterwards. I can't remember exactly what Councillor Evans' wording was. I think he did say amendment, but in the alternative, Councillor Brown is right. Councillor Tandy has moved that nothing is done until the action plan has been finished. Or the action plan may never be finished, because it will be a living, breathing document, and things happen, things come and go. And I think it's vitally important that this internal overview and scrutiny panel actually rolls its sleeves up and gets stuck in. It's been 10 years since the last working party on it. I know, because I was on the working party 10 years ago with councillors Shepherd, Watkins, and then Haynes. And Councillor Lloyd said at the last full council that everything is on the table and they're looking at the options. If he's doing that as the portfolio holder, it's our right and responsibility as scrutiny members to get stuck into that debate too, and have our say and put items on the table that the portfolio holder may wish to consider. And also, I think we need to be monitoring much more closely than these scrutiny panel meetings, which can be done through a working group, how this action plan is moving forward, and whether actually things need to be added to it and be critical friends to this action plan. I think Councillor Tandy's amendment is an effort to deflect the real issue into the long grass, which is the future and sustainability of the Civic Hall for the long term. As councillors, we should be getting stuck in now to look at what's going on and how we recover from COVID and the future of the Civic Hall and how we actually get it up and running. I think it's not an awful attempt to bounce this down the road, and really we need to get stuck in now, Chair. So I can't vote for Councillor Tandy's what I consider to be unconstitutional amendment, but unconstitutionality isn't alien to Councillor Tandy. But we need to actually crack on and get on with the job, Chair.
Philip Richardson, what is the legal position, or what can we do and what we can't do?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just going back to the beginning, Councillor Evans moved his motion, which was to add an additional paragraph to the motion that's printed on the agenda paper. Technically, that's not an amendment, because actually what Councillor Evans has moved is the motion as he has proposed it. So it's including his additional paragraph as set out in the chat box. So just to deal with that first point of Councillor Wilson, I don't think it's an amendment to an amendment at this stage. It is simply an amendment to the motion, because up until Councillor Evans moving anything, nothing had been moved. It does raise the other question, though, Chair, and I'm not entirely sure it's a case of a total negation as such. And I know we've had this discussion certainly at full council many times. However, I think we need to consider what Councillor Tandy has moved, and whether what she is moving is an amendment to the paragraph that Councillor Evans moved, in which case I think you may have some difficulty with that, because I'm just looking at the wording in Councillor Evans's motion. The wording that Councillor Tandy has used, obviously an amendment would be to take words out and to add words in, and I'm struggling to see what words have been taken out, what's been added in, without actually saying the whole thing's been taken away. So that is a bit of an issue. Having said that, you could view what Councillor Tandy has moved is an amendment to the motion in its entirety. In other words, you've still got 4.1 to 4.3 as part of the motion, and that what Councillor Tandy has done is effectively just removed the whole of what Councillor Evans has moved. So that's a long-winded way of saying it. I don't think, well, I have to say this, Chair, it is you that has to make this decision as to whether you consider that this negates the motion, and you will have to consider whether in substance what Councillor Tandy has moved has completely negated the motion. And I think it's difficult to say that because of the other elements that are still left in situ. It's a difficult one to call. I know members think that if you move an amendment which does something slightly or totally different to what was being proposed, that negates the motion. I don't think it does, because by negation we are talking about a direct negative, and it's not doing that, it is doing something else. I totally agree, but I don't think that would then result in the amendment being ruled out of order. However, Chair, it is for you as Chair to make that decision. Chair, you're muted.
I think I should just stay muted. Councillor Brown.
Many thanks, Chair. And I've listened to what Director Richardson said carefully. And in essence, what he appears to be saying is that the effect of Councillor Tandy's amendment is to remove the entirety of Councillor Evans' proposed addition to the original motion. And whilst he might not consider it to be negating it, it is proposing to remove the requirement for the committee to take some action, with the requirement for the committee just to wait for a further report. And that does seem to be proposing to do something which is entirely different to Councillor Evans's perfectly valid proposal, really, which is that we have a working party to look into the future of the civic hall, since it seems to be something that's being considered portfolio holder level within the council anyway. It is an important thing. It's a great asset to the borough if it's managed and run properly, and we need to be making sure that's what's happening to preserve its future within the borough. And so yeah, I would absolutely feel that we should proceed with Councillor Evans's original proposal, and that we should discard the subsequent one from Councillor Tandy, because that simply preserves the status quo, because we'd have likely had a report from in due course in the new year anyway, especially since it doesn't specify when in the new year. It could be any time. So I think you really need to be taking Councillor Evans's proposal as the valid one. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, I left my hand up from before, so I didn't wish to speak.
Okay. Councillor Evans.
Chair, could I clarify, are we speaking to my recommendation or are we speaking to the unconstitutional amendment?
My understanding that it's not an unconstitutional amendment.
So, sorry, could you just clarify your ruling, Chair?
Well, I'm following the advice of our.
Could I make a point of personal explanation, please?
Councillor Tandy.
Thank you, Chair. I did put it in the chat. I moved the amendment I moved was against the addition that Councillor Evans had made to the original proposal. That is exactly what I was doing. It was against Councillor Evans' addition to the recommendation as written. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Can I carry on, Chair?
Yep.
Okay, so we're speaking to whatever Councillor Tandy's put in the chat. I just don't understand what that achieves, because we all know in this, I was going to say in this room, but we all know within this meeting that the Civic Hall has got some, pretty substantial issues, and we need to sit around a table and we need to discuss these issues, and we can't keep kicking this into the long grass, because we've got a funding gap of nearly £250,000. Since 2010, we've been bailing out the Civic Hall to the tune of £500,000 a year. We have to change the Civic Hall. You cannot continue to operate a non-discretionary service in the way that you are. So we need to have some sort of working party. I don't care what you call it. You can call it a working party, a select committee, I don't care. But we need to have something in place so councillors can come in and scrutinise the operation and the management of the Civic Hall. I don't quite get what Councillor Tandy's amendment does, because first of all, we get 2 reports each year anyway, and secondly, it says the report to come back in the new year. Well, as Councillor Damon Brown correctly stated, that could mean December 2021, for all we know. So it doesn't achieve anything, and I keep making this point all the time. I've moved in the past that we bring in external auditors. You don't want that. I accept that. That's your point of view. I genuinely thought this would be a friendly proposal so that both parties could sit or have a meeting over Zoom to iron these issues out. And I don't quite understand why you would be against that. And it sort of comes back to the point that I've made before. What do you have to hide? I mean, is it something that I could find out using a freedom of information request? Because I don't understand why you're so obstructive when it comes to the Civic Hall. let's just have the opportunity to have a meeting and iron some of these issues out. And for all we know, as you know, we actually do achieve quite a lot in the working groups, and we probably could with this. And as Councillor Wilson stated earlier, there has been a Civic Hall working party in the past, nearly 10 years ago. Why can't we just have one now? But at the end of the day, if you don't want a working party, fine, just vote against it. But, you know, moving silly amendments like this that don't achieve anything, as we know, it just wastes half an hour. So let's move on.
Yes, Councillor, I was hoping that we could have moved on somewhat a bit more earlier than what we actually did. I don't think it's a silly thing when people want to say what they're going to say. They should have the time to say it. And I don't agree with a lot of the things you actually say, but you've got the right to say them, Councillor. Councillor Condicor.
Thank you very much, Chair. We are facing a possible abolition of the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council at some point in the future. The Civic Hall is really important, and I think we need to work out how we ensure it has a future. And looking at Councillor Evans' amendment or motion, depending how it's described, I think what it needs to say is we set a working party up to consider how to ensure a future for the Bedworth Civic Hall. And it's a very positive thing we need this working party to do, in terms of, do we make it work more with the Ben Hall in Bedworth, rugby and other venues, to be a trust that does arts across North Warwickshire? Do we make it a freestanding trust? Yeah, how do we put it on a footing that when local government reform comes in, it is actually something that won't just disappear in the chaos that is likely to ensue in local government? I think a working party is good. I think there'll be politics in terms of what you call the working party, but I think ignoring the problem and just leaving the Civic Hall as it is will mean that when a unitary does get formed, that unitary will just close the Civic Hall, which I don't think anyone in the borough wants. What the people in the borough want is a venue that costs them only a reasonable amount of money and provides a very large amount of entertainment, culture, and yeah, so many mental health. I mean, Patricia Elliott was talking earlier about the pantomime and how they do special pantomimes for those that need a quiet, more relaxed pantomime. All this good stuff will be lost if we do not have a reformed way of running the Civic Hall, and we have opportunities to run it with other venues that face similar problems. And I think if we did look at people like the Ben Hall in rugby, what happened in Coventry, we need to look at something so we can share resources, share management expertise, and actually get a value for money entertainment venue. And I know the Civic Hall takes up a vast amount of Kevin Hollis's time. Surely actually looking at how we make it a freestanding something that gives it may need a grant from the Borough Council to keep it going, but at least it has some management of its own, is a way forward. So I'm really keen we do a working party. And I think we need to be more positive and actually say this is a working party to sort out how we ensure a future for the Civic Hall. In a positive way. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I'm not as pessimistic as you, Councillor. I think that if the local government reform actually happened, Nuneaton and Bedworth will be enhanced by getting rid of, let's say, the Warwickshire County Council, if that's what the people decide. So I take a different point of view from you. I look at it more positively, that we should have services local. And I know fine well in the past, we've had dealings with the recall, we've had dealings with Ben Hall, we've had dealings with the Belgrade, even up to the point of the NEC, where we've tried to do different things. So it's just not, the Civic Hall should not just be taken in isolation. It should be, as you say, part of that bigger picture. And of course, with the COVID-19, that has put a kibosh on a lot of things. And as the portfolio holder says, we're going to have to have a look at all kinds of things that's going to possibly happen for the Civic Hall in the future. But I don't take it as I take it more positively rather than the negative picture that you tried to point out, Councillor, and I hope that it works out. I've got 3 more speakers, then I'll come to some sort of decision which way we're going to vote. Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Chair.
Four more speakers, then that's it. Councillor Elliott, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. There's some mincing of words going on here. A talk about reform, and in reality, we're talking about privatisation. Some silly comments about the new year being December 2021. There's just a lot of silliness, and I would just like to point out that we are still in the middle of a pandemic. You were talking about having a working party with partners. Nobody knows what's happening. I think it's a very, very sensible amendment. The work is already going on. Let's have the report come back in the new year. Councillor Evans, the new year is normally January time, not December time. So I just think let's support this amendment. Let's stop having tiresome points of order and different parts of the Constitution. Let's just get on and support the Civic Hall so that it keeps going. We need it to keep going. I said earlier how I can't get private organisations to put things on like relaxed pantomimes. We need the Civic Hall. So let's let them do their work and report back to us in the new year. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown.
Apologies, Chair. My hand was still raised in error from last time, and I seem to be having difficulty in muting.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first I'd like to thank you for actually allowing debate when you said that you are quite happy to have a debate. It's more than we were allowed the other week. And I, for one, unlike Councillor Elliott, am prepared to debate this moving forward, because it is right that we have this debate, and we'd have had this amount of debate on local government reform. We would have been much more better informed and democratic. The issue is that Councillor Tandy, in her point of personal explanation, let the cat out the bag. She said, and I quote, she moved the amendment against what Councillor Evans said. Councillor Tandy specifically said the word against. Now, I understand Councillor Richardson, Director Richardson's point that it's an iffy area. Well, in legal interpretation, you have the strict interpretation and you have the purposive interpretation, either one of which is perfectly adequate. But actually, Councillor Tandy has revealed her purpose behind moving her amendment wasn't to improve, wasn't to add, wasn't to be constructive to Councillor Evans's proposal to have a working group. It was against. Now, really, the appropriate thing to do, instead of having all these shenanigans which Councillor Elliott apparently now seems against, is not to move an amendment which is clearly designed to be against. Just let us vote on the proposal before us, which Councillor Evans did. If that falls, then you get what you want. It's against. You don't have the working group. And it's quite clear from what Councillor Tandy said. She doesn't want a working group at all on this. She's quite happy with the status quo. That's a legitimate point to take if that is what you want to do. But don't try and flower it up in some kind of way that you're moving a positive amendment and this, that and the other. The way to let us actually have a proper, meaningful debate and vote on this. This isn't an amendment, and I believe, Chair, you should rule it out of order on the prima facie evidence that Councillor Tandy said her amendment was against what Councillor Evans said. Then let's have a proper democratic vote on what's going on with the working group and either have one or not. But I think actually this borough will be poorer for not having the working group, because what Councillor Evans has said and what Councillor Condacor has said are perfectly true. Things are going to change. and we need to look at what's going on, and we need to have our input where we can. I don't believe, as an elected councillor, we should leave the future of the Civic Hall to one man, the Arts and Leisure portfolio holder. Every single one of us, every 34 members of this authority has a stake in what happens and should have an input into what goes on, as well as the residents. Let us have the working group and let us get on with the job of scrutinising the Civic Hall and making some recommendations to improve it and take it forward to the future. And Councillor Elliott is just trying to muddy the waters when she says about privatisation. No one at all in this debate mentioned privatisation until she did. Perhaps she's actually letting the cat out of the bag that she wants to look at privatisation. But let's get on with the real job of having a review into the Civic Hall. Then we can consider what we do for the future. Thank you, Chair.
I have two more speakers and then I'll go to some kind of vote. Councillor Longden.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we're hearing it all, aren't we? I was against Councillor Evans's addition, if that's what you want to call it, simply because we've been round the loop before, haven't we? That nothing positive ever comes from your side at all in terms of what the Civic Hall means to people and what it does and what it provides. And you're just looking for ways to make your arguments so that you can do something about it financially and do something about closing it and all the rest of it. We've been round these loops so many times before. We've sat here, we've listened to the report of the director, who gave very, very reasonable arguments on the questions that he had, and then we try to start jiggling with what he wants to do in taking this matter forward. And he's got an action plan there that he wants to do, and therefore it's right they should be allowed to do that and not be prejudged by having a working party breathing down his neck every 2 minutes. That's not on. Let the people do the work. We've got staff that we pay to do that work. Let them get on with it, and let them, at the end of the day, let them come back with what they've discovered and what they're going to do to make things better. You're not giving them a chance at all. You just want to interfere and get in the way of the process. So therefore, I will not support Councillor Evans, not one little bit, and I would support Councillor Tandy's amendment to it, in order to allow the people who are doing the job to get on and do the job. Thank you, Chair.
Last speaker, Councillor Tandy.
Thank you very much, Chair. I listened with interest to the debate, and I do find it quite odd that Councillor Evans has accused me of wasting time. I'm also a little surprised by Councillor Wilson's comments about shenanigans. However, Chair, I stand by amendment, as I do believe that the Civic Hall team must be given the opportunity to do their job without interference from anyone, and especially when we have in front of us the development plan that has been drawn up by the director with their help. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, Philip, where do we go from here? Do we have I got to put to a vote?
Well, if I can come back, Chair, to the question that Councillor Wilson posed to you, I think it was Councillor Wilson, you need to make a determination first whether you accept that it's a valid amendment. I think that's the first thing you need to do. Clearly, if you do, then we would take a vote on that, and then it would become, if it's carried, that would become a substantive motion. If it's not carried, then you will deal with Councillor Evans's motion, which is the 4.1 to 4.4 as he had proposed it.
So let's get this perfectly clear. What we're actually voting on is the original motion that's what was originally said, and then Councillor Tandy's amendment. Is that right?
If I can just take a step back, Chair. Councillor Evans has moved a motion, which is, if I just say it's 4.1 to 4.4, And the 4.4 is the additional part that has been added in the chat by Councillor Evans to suggest that there be a working party.
I've seen that, yeah.
Councillor Tandy, if I understood what she said in her point of personal explanation, is saying that she's keeping 4.1 to 4.3 and only seeking to amend the references in 4.4 only. So you need to decide, Chair, whether that's a valid amendment, whether it negates the motion or not, whether it adds or removes words, etc., as set out in the Constitution. If you're satisfied that it is valid, then we can take a vote on it. If you're not, then obviously you would reject the amendment and we'd take a vote on the original motion.
Well, in that case, I'll make the decision that we vote on the amendment.
Okay, Chair. In which case, Chair, we will take a vote by roll call.
Recorded vote.
And we will have a recorded vote. So, if members, this is to consider the amendment becoming the substantive motion. So, if you could indicate whether you're for, against, or abstaining. So, Councillor Brown.
If this is to consider Councillor Tandy's amendment, then I'm against it.
Thank you. Yes, it is. Councillor Doughty.
For.
Councillor Elliott.
For.
Councillor Evans.
Against.
Councillor Glass.
For.
Councillor Pandair.
Against.
Councillor Guttridge.
Against.
Councillor Hocking.
For.
Councillor Kandaka.
Against.
Councillor Longdon.
For.
Councillor Rudkin.
For.
Councillor Sargent. Is Councillor Sargent here? I'll just check at the end, Chair, whether Councillor Sargent is here. Councillor Tandy.
For.
Councillor Wilson.
Against.
Kelly, can you confirm whether Councillor, you said Jane Sargent was going to be a substitute. Can you confirm whether Councillor Sargent is present, please?
I don't believe she fell from the list. No, she isn't.
Okay, so she's absent. Just bear with me, Chair. Chair, that's 7 votes for the amendment and 6 against, so that would be carried. So that now becomes a substantive motion. Do you wish me to take the vote on that, or do you? I see Councillor Evans is indicating, Chair.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you very much, Chair. Could I please move an amendment? Sorry, let me rephrase that. Could I please move an additional recommendation to the substantive motion, which I've included within the group chat below recommendation 4.4? Insert the following: 4.5, in accordance with Article 4E.19 of the Council's Constitution, this panel resolves to establish a select committee to consider the future of the Bedworth Civic Hall.
Mr. Richardson, is that not basically what we have voted against? That in different words?
Well, Chair, there are words and there are words. Councillor Evans is quite right. There is a paragraph 4E19, and there is the right for this panel to establish a select committee, which is slightly different to a working party. So again, Chair, if I can just reiterate the point, you will have to make that decision as Chair. It's perfectly legitimate to add words to a motion, and clearly the wording is very similar, but it is referring to a select committee, not a working party. So as such, I think you could quite readily consider it to be a valid amendment, and therefore you would need to consider that.
Well, in that case, I don't think it's a valid amendment. I think it's just changing a couple of words.
Point of order.
Point of order, Chair.
Point of order. Director Richardson, sorry, you are going to have to come in here. That would be unlawful. There is a paragraph in the Constitution, 4E.19, that clearly states an OSP can establish a select committee. That is completely different to a working party in the way that both committees would perform. So I'm sorry, but Councillor Glass cannot rule that motion out of order. I mean, if that's his ruling, fine, but I think he's on a bit of a sticky wicket with that one.
Always willing to accept advice, Councillor Condacor, before I bring in Councillor Tandy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We haven't actually voted on establishing a working party because that was negated by Councillor Tandy's amendment. I think it'd be quickest to take a vote straight away without debate on Councillor Evans' motion so we can actually move forward, but also have a vote on setting up a very important group. Thank you.
Councillor Tandy.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Evans' initial, sorry. I think Councillor Evans' initial motion has already been defeated in relation to a working party, and I would continue, Chair, to oppose the addition that Councillor Evans has made to the substantive motion that has been agreed, and I will vote against it, Chair.
Councillor Longden.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to second Councillor Condicor's motion to move the vote. It's getting ridiculous now. He'll come back with something else in a minute, so we might as well get him out of the way as soon as possible.
Mr. Richardson has been moved to vote. Can we move straight to the vote in favour or against Councillor Evans' amendment or whatever it is?
Recorded vote.
Can I just be okay? Can I just be clear, Chair? Are you saying that you accept that this is now a valid amendment and therefore taking a vote on the amendment?
If it speeds up the process, yes, why not? Speed up the process, move to the vote.
Right. Thank you, Chair. So if you could, this is now to consider the amendment moved by Councillor Evans to add the 4.5 into the recommendation. That is set out at 7:08 in the chat. So could you please indicate whether you're for or against the amendment? So Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Doughty?
Against.
Councillor Elliott?
Against.
Councillor Evans?
For.
Councillor Glass?
Against.
Councillor Panday?
For.
Councillor Guttridge?
For.
Councillor Hocking?
Against.
Councillor Kandaka?
For.
Councillor Longden?
Against.
Councillor Rudkin?
Against.
Councillor Sargent? I'm just going to call Councillor Sargent just in case. Absent. Councillor Tandy?
Against.
And Councillor Wilson?
For.
Chair, that is 6 for the amendment and 7 against, so the amendment falls. Do you now wish to move to a vote on the substantive motion as moved by Councillor Tandy? Oh, Councillor Evans is indicating, Chair.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to move an amendment to the substantive motion below recommendation 4.4, insert the following 4.5. In accordance with Article 4E19 of the Council's Constitution, this panel resolves to establish a select committee to scrutinise the operation and management of the Bedworth Civic Hall. And that's in the group chat. Just to clarify, that is different to the one that I moved beforehand.
Right, so I take it we're back to where we were before. Councillor Longden.
I said he was going to do this, didn't I, Chair? It's so it's so predictable. Move the vote be put.
Councillor Condicor.
I agree with Barry. We're not getting anywhere. Let's move to the final vote and move on.
Mr. Richardson has been moved to vote.
Are you accepting that?
Yes, I shall accept it, just to get things to move on.
Okay, in which case, please indicate whether you are for or against the
vote
amendment as moved by Councillor Evans at 7:15 p.m. So if you could vote, indicate whether you're for or against or abstaining. Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Doughty?
Against.
Councillor Elliott?
Against.
Councillor Evans?
For.
Councillor Glass?
Against.
Councillor Pandare?
For.
Councillor Guttridge?
For.
Councillor Hocking?
Against.
Councillor Kandaka?
For.
Councillor Longden?
Against.
Councillor Rudkin?
Against.
Councillor Sargent is absent. Councillor Tandy?
Against.
Councillor Wilson?
For.
Chair, that's lost. It was 6-4, 7 against.
So I take it we're voting. Well, hold on. Councillor Evans is indicated again. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to move an additional recommendation to the substantive motion below recommendation 4.4. Insert the following. 4.5. In accordance with Article 4E.20 of the Council's Constitution, this panel resolves to establish a working party to scrutinise the operation and management of the Bedworth Civic Hall, and that can be found in the group chat.
Does that find a seconder? Does that find a seconder? Nope, so it's lost then, Councillor. So we move to the substantial vote then. The substantial more.
Thank you,
the
Chair.
The original one.
Chair.
Councillor Brown is indicated, Chair.
I've been trying to second Councillor Evans' motion, but unfortunately somebody keeps muting me. I think we're up to the same shenanigans as happened at the last full council here.
Well, I don't know about that, Councillor. I thought the process had changed since then, and there was less chance of that happening.
We'll have a look at that, Chair. So Chair, are you accepting Councillor Evans's amendment as a valid amendment?
What I've got to say is that this is why people turn off local politics, because of all this. There's on and on and on and on and on and on. And it's, how many times have we got to accept this, Philip? Because if we're going to accept amendments, further amendments and further amendments again, changing words.
Well, Chair,
will knock it in the head now.
Chair, I can advise you. You haven't asked for my advice, but if you want it, I can give it. Would you like me to advise you?
I would like your advice, please.
Thank you, Chair. In which case, Chair, I'm going to refer to Council Procedure Rules. And the reason for that is that an amendment it can be ruled invalid if it is substantially the same as a previous motion that has been rejected. So if I can just find the relevant wording, Chair. Chair, I'm looking at Council Procedure Rule 413.6. Now, there is nothing there that would prevent an amendment being moved as long as it is adding or deleting words, or adding words and deleting words, as the case may be, as long as it doesn't negate the motion. So look at 436. It would be an acceptable amendment for Councillor Evans to move. It does say if an amendment is not carried, other amendments to the original motion may be moved. So it would appear to be perfectly legitimate for you to consider that to be a valid amendment.
So considering I was to move it, if it was a valid amendment, that means that we're going to have a debate on it, and then once again we have to vote again on the anticipation that there might be another further amendment. Philip, is that what you're saying to me?
Yes, Chair. The only alternative is to move a closure motion, which is open to them if they wish to move on to other business.
Chair, if we could just say for clarity, this will be my last amendment.
You're muted, Chair. You're muted, Chair.
Sorry, my apologies. I'll accept that that's what you're saying, Councillor. It still doesn't stop anybody else doing it. But I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 more speakers, then I'll move for the closure amendment or whatever Philip was saying. Councillor Brown, you've got your hand up. Do you wish to speak?
To progress this, I only wanted to speak to second Councillor Evans' proposal. Thank you.
Councillor Pandar.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't think there is any harm to set up a working party. I know why they keep on blocking. If this party is set up, they will just oversee the actions or decision taken by the civic hall officials. So what is the wrong about setting up a party? Why keep on voting again and again to set up something which is a right thing to see what is going on in the civic hall? That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Longdon, and then Councillor Condacor will be the last speaker.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't got the constitution on, and I don't, so I don't know what any numbers about, but there is something in there about being frivolous, and this is getting frivolous to the point of being vexatious, and therefore I think it should be stopped at this point, because he's gone way past the point of anybody's patience, just to try and ensure that we don't get to the vote on the substantive motion because he couldn't get his own way. I've got an 11-year-old granddaughter that behaves better than him. So that's it, Chair. Can we move now to the vote, please?
I won't be taking lessons from someone who called
Councillor, you haven't indicated that you wish to speak. Councillor Conductor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got lots of sympathy for what Kyle is trying to do, but he's not getting anywhere, and it really is time to move on because we've got so much important stuff on this agenda still to look at, and this repeated going on and on is absolutely maddening for the public and us members. I've already had one 6-hour meeting this week at the County Council. I have no intention of supporting Carl if he doesn't just accept we've lost this, they're blocking us, we'll move on and we'll moan about it some other time. Thank you, Chair.
There are some of us, thank you for your input there, but some of us would say that it was a legitimate target in order to stymie the meeting, just to keep going on and on and on and really do exactly what people are saying. Listen to that lot. They just can't make their minds up and they go on and on and on. It's a tactic that's been used for many, many years, and I'm sure it'll be a tactic that's been used or be used again in the future. Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. I take it then we are going to the vote on the amendment moved by Councillor Evans at 7:17. Could members please indicate whether they're for, against or abstain? Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Doughty?
Against.
Councillor Elliott?
Against.
Councillor Evans?
For.
Councillor Glass?
Against.
Councillor Pandare?
For.
Councillor Guttridge?
For.
Councillor Hocking?
Against.
Councillor Kandaka?
Abstain.
Councillor Longdon?
Against.
Councillor Rudkin?
Against.
Councillor Sargent is absent. Councillor Tandy?
Against.
Councillor Wilson?
For.
That's lost, Chair. Shall I now move to the vote on the substantive motion as moved by Councillor Tandy?
By all means, Philip.
So if members could please indicate whether for or against the motion as moved by Councillor Tandy. Councillor Brown?
Against.
Councillor Doughty?
For.
Councillor Elliott?
For.
Councillor Evans?
Against, and I'd like my vote recorded.
Councillor Glass?
For.
Councillor Pandare?
Against.
Councillor Guttridge?
Against.
Councillor Hocking?
For.
Councillor Kandaka?
Against, and please record my vote. Thank you.
Longdon?
For.
Councillor Rudkin?
For.
Councillor Sargent is absent. Councillor Tandy?
For.
Councillor Wilson?
Against, and please record my vote.
That's carried, Chair. 7 votes to 6.
So we move on to the substantial motion then, is it?
No, Chair, that's it. You have taken the vote on the substantive motion.
I wanted to make sure that everybody knew where we were heading for. Before I continue on with the next agenda item, Councillor Longdon, Pandar and Tandy, your mics are all on. Could you mute them, please?
Sorry.
So it's all right. I'm trying to stop the background noise if there is any, that is. Right. Seems a long way around, but we go to the next one. Philip, I believe you're taking it. The integral performance reports. Philip, is that you?
It can be, Chair. If Kevin's here, he can. He can also sort of jump in if need be. Chair, the report is in its standard format. It is covering because of the pandemic and the fact that we're playing catch up. You have got the end of year fourth quarter report for 1920 and the first quarter of 21. Obviously, the latter will be from 1st of April, so it will be quite heavily impacted by the pandemic. In terms of the report itself, as required by the Office of the Surveillance Commissioner, we have noted that there have been no covert surveillance operations undertaken in the period that is being covered by this report. The appendices, Chair, at Appendix A sets out the certainly the first part is the report for year end for this panel, and you'll see there that there are a number of discrepancies, not least I think the overall financial position, which principally due to the homelessness subsidy position resulted in the general fund being circa 300,000 over, and that had to be drawn from balances. Chair, there's obviously a lot of detail in the report, and I think it's probably easier simply to invite members to ask their questions, and Kevin and I, if Kevin's still here, will endeavour to answer them if we can.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I've only got one question on this report, and it's in relation to pages 89 and 147 around the satisfaction with council promoted shows at the Civic Hall. We've got the data for both. What year is it? We've got two pieces of data, but my question is, how many responses are we getting? Because it's great that we're getting satisfaction levels of 100%, but if we're only getting one response that says 100%, then the data is not really that much use to us, is it really?
Chair, if I come into that, I don't have the exact numbers, but what I'll do is I'll look into that and come back to you, councillor, so I can let you know what the response rate and how many is. I know that we're looking to amend that, and I know that we've had previous discussions in terms of hard copies and how we do that. But I'll come back to you, councillor. Thank you, Chair.
Is there some sort of benchmark in place where there has to be a certain number of responses in order for them to get reported to us? Because if it's the case that we've had 50 odd responses and they've all been at 100%, that's great, and I congratulate the Civic Hall staff if that's what they've achieved. But equally, if we've only got one or two responses, both of which are giving satisfaction levels of 100%, the data isn't really reliable. It doesn't really show us anything. So I just hope that my point can be noted.
Chair, I will look into that and come back.
I'm really surprised here, Councillor Evans, but I actually think you make a valid point. There's at the last was it the last time I spoke at Cabinet, we were talking about a similar report that went to grounds maintenance about the 100%, but we never knew whether it was 2 people or 3 people or whatever who was answering these questionnaires. So I think your point is very valid, and we should look at it. Councillor Condikar.
Thank you very much, Chair. We have all the outturn here for the revenue account, but we don't seem to have the end of year for the housing account fund, or whatever you call it. And that's supposed to be in our remit as well, the housing. So I'd like to know why we don't get that, unless I'm missing it somewhere. And also what's happening about the massive overspend on the fire marshals, which I think was about £800,000 split over the 2 years. Thank you, Chair.
Kevin.
Chair, I haven't got an answer to that at this time, but I think following the meeting we'll get back to the councillor with answers to his queries.
Anybody else want to speak on that report? Okay, we'll note the report and put the things under consideration which we've spoken to, and Kevin will get back to all of us to see what the answers are. I'll move on to the next item then, the forward plan. It's just for information, page 227. Work programme, sorry, anything on the forward plan? No. Work programme, page 231. Anybody want to say anything on that? Nope. In that case, there isn't any other items of emergency programmes or anything I've received as a matter of urgency. So thanks one and all for the meeting tonight, and thank you for your contributions. Good night.
Chair, do I have your permission to stop the live stream? Sorry.
Oh, I forgot you have my permission to stop the live stream. Could you please tell us when it happens, Kelly?
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.